We are going to, yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, the light behind me is not perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to start our class in just one moment. You can see that there are some people on the web, which is fantastic. Let me just get set up. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone who is viewing on the World Wide Web as well. I see that there's some. The light is causing a little bit of a distraction, but no, I think it's okay. Just makes it look like kind of a halo behind me, but I think it's okay. It's okay. You know what? Why can you try that? Let's just see if that works. That's better. Great. Thank you. Is that okay with everybody here? Okay, great. Okay, so just before we start, I just want to take this opportunity to note that today's lecture, the Week of Learning, is sponsored by the Wimmer family in memory of Sally's brother, Yitzchak and Haskell, and also by Saul and Deborah Graf in memory of Saul's daughter, Saul and Deborah's daughter, Liat Graf, Liat Bas Shlomo, the Neshama should have an Aliyah. Just want to see this just 1 second. Okay, here we go. All right, so let us begin. We're going to look at the beginning. Okay, we are going to look at the beginning of Parshat Vayeshev. If you have the source sheets in front of you, it is source number 1. The Torah tells us in the very beginning of this week's Torah portion, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And Jacob dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. So essentially, the Torah tells us in the beginning of this week's Torah portion that Yaakov is back in the land of Israel. But the Torah, which is always so precise with its language, adds in 3 words to this verse, which are altogether unnecessary. I bolded the word, so hopefully you know what I'm getting at. The Torah could have just told us, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Canaan. And Yaakov lived and dwelled in the land of Canaan. What is the Torah adding by telling us be'eretz migurei aviv? That Jacob dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings. What exactly is added by that phrase? So let's start by looking at the Ramban. This class is going to focus on 19th century biblical commentaries, but we do so by way of looking at the classical medieval commentaries first. Not always the case, but generally the case. So let's look at the Ramban in source number 2. Writes the Ramban as follows: Tam Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv, ki amar she'alufei Esav yeshvu be'eretz achuzasam. The Torah has told us in the previous chapter that Esav and all of his progeny and all of the tribes that have come from Esav, they dwelled be'eretz achuzasam. What achuzah? Right, what you grab, it in general, it refers to ancestral land. So Esav and his very large, robust family have dwelt in their land that they have been given. Klomar haaretz shalachu lahem lachuzas olam. The land that is been grabbed for them as an eternal heritage. They have their land. What's Esav's land? We know Esav's land is referred to as Har Seir. If you look back in the previous chapter, this is in Perek Lamed Vav. I also have it for you in source number 3, Perek Lamed Vav Pasuk Ches. Esav behar Seir, Esav hu Edom. So Esav dwelt on the mount of Seir. Esav, that is Edom. And we know that Esav receives the land of Edom, which you can see more fully, a pasuk in Yehoshua in source number 4. Ve'etein liYitzchak es Yaakov ve'es Esav, ve'etein le'Esav es Har Seir lo reshes oso, v'Yaakov uvanav yardu Mitzrayim. And just to read the English, and I gave to Isaac, Jacob, and Esav. And I gave to Esav Mount Seir to inherit it. And Jacob and his children went down into Egypt.
There's no equality there.
In what sense?
With Yaakov, when I tell Yitzchak it's Yaakov, it's Esau,
right?
2 sons.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to talking about anything, the Reshus is Har Seir.
Right. Okay, very good. So the pasuk in Yoshua doesn't focus on, at least the pasuk that I gave you, doesn't focus on what was given to Jacob and his children. It probably does so in the following verse. I just didn't bring that for you on the source sheet. What I wanted to show you is that Har Seir, that area where Esav learned about in the end of last week's parsha, that was Esav's heritage. That was his land, the location that he and his family was going to inherit. Okay, so how does that explain the opening pasuk in our parsha? So look further in the Ramban, source number 2, line number 2. Aval Yaakov Yoshev Ger Ke'aviv Be'eretz Lo Lahem. Yaakov dwelt as a foreigner, just like his father did, in a land that did not belong to him. The Torah is telling us that Yaakov deliberately chose to live in the most choicest of lands. And additionally, Yaakov intended to fulfill or to continue fulfilling what had already begun, that Yaakov was living in a land that was not his own. Again, harkening back to the given to Abraham. Remember with Bris Bein HaBesarim, Abraham is told that your children will be sojourners in a land that is not their own. That started already from Yitzchak, and Yaakov is continuing on in that theme. Essentially, the timer of the 400 years that God spoke about only is on when you look at Yaakov's sojourns, where Yaakov lives. It's not with Esau. So let me try to just summarize the Ramban for just a moment. What the Ramban is doing is explaining to us the phrase "Ve'eretz Migurei Avi." Why the Torah simply couldn't have just left it out. The Torah could have just said, Vayeshev Yaakov Eretz Canaan, and Yaakov dwelled in the land of Canaan. What is added by the phrase Be'eretz Migurei Aviv? So says the Ramban, what's added on is a contrast to Esav. Esav dwelled permanently. Esav dwelled in Seir, as we know from the previous Perek, and we know in Sefer Yoshua this was the portion that was given to Esav to inherit. So Esav settles benachas. He settles down, he buys a house, he pays off his mortgage, his family is very happy, they all cluster around him. It's Gishmak. But that's Esav, not Yaakov. Yaakov continues in the path that was set before him by his father. Be'eretz Migurei Aviv. They lived as foreigners, sojourning in a land that did not belong to them. Why did they do so? So 2 reasons. First of all, it's Eretz HaNivcheres. It's the choicest of lands. But that seems to really be secondary to the primary issue, which is that they understood that they could not live all too comfortably. They could not live as permanent residents because, after all, it was told to the Zayda that the children will live in a land that is not their own, but be essentially in exile for 400 years. And Yaakov understood that. So he lived not like a permanent individual who has settled, but he lived the Eretz Migurei Aviv, the same way his father lived. Not with permanence, not fully settled. But they lived in the land of Israel, and they understood that the clock that was already started from the birth of Yitzchak was already counting down as they continue on their lives. Does everyone understand that?
I understand that. I understand your explaining. It almost seems like the plain reading of the words Jacob settled in the land of his father's sojourn. Sojourn is implied, at least moving around, with the word settled implies permanence. So
interesting.
I understand
Good.
you're thinking of it. Jacob permanently settled
Good.
in the land where his father moved.
Okay, it's a very good point, Jeff. So for those of you listening in on the World Wide Web, Jeff is coming up with a fantastic point. Jeff is noting that the language of Vayeshev means to sit, to want to rest. We're going to come back to that point. But that does seem to be in contrast to what the Ramban highlights, that Yaakov was living not with any permanence, because he understood that the promise to Abraham was being fulfilled through him about the exile. It's a very, very good point, one that we'll come back to, Mirz Hashem. Okay, so that was the Ramban's approach. The Eretz Migurei Aviv is coming to create a contrast to the way Esav settled down permanently. Yaakov understood that he was just a foreigner. But the Netziv, in source number 5, explains that there's something deeper that's taking place here as well. The Netziv writes as follows: Bir hamikra amat lo hisnahe Yaakov kidarko. The Torah is explaining to us here why Yaakov does not continue on with his regular path. What do I mean by regular path? Yaakov had a certain mahalich, a certain approach to life, essentially up to this point. What was Yaakov's approach? And Rabbi Blech, I should say, spoke about this when he was in our shul last year. Remember, Rabbi Blech talked about Yaakov had a disposition for fleeting, for running away from issues. He runs away from Esav at the end of Parshat Toldos. He runs away from Lavan. And according to some Meforshim, in last week's Torah portion, he also is trying to run away from Esau. That's why he's crossing the river. So Yaakov had a disposition of flight. He wanted to run away. That's what Rabbi Blech spoke about when he was in our shul last year in the Scal Residence, a beautiful drasha, which I'm hopefully you remember because it was really magnificent. So what Rabbi Blech said is already echoed a century, I should say, 2 centuries ago, in the Netziv. So let's look at it again one more time. We'll start from the beginning. Bir hamikra alma lo hisnahi Yaakov kidarko. The Torah is telling us why Yaakov did not follow his regular path. Lifanos haderech. What does that mean? Lifanos haderech. What does poneh mean? To turn. Poneh means to turn. So the Netziv says that the Torah is explaining to us why Yaakov did not continue with his regular super of flight. Why Yaakov did not make a decision to turn away and defer to Esau. In other words, go in a different direction. When Yaakov was traveling back to Canaan and he hears that Esau is on his way, so why didn't Yaakov just go in a different direction altogether? Why didn't he go to Jordan? What we call Jordan. Why didn't he go to any of the other adjacent nations? Why did he go into the land? It's not Yaakov's way. That's what the Netziv is commenting on. Jeff, can I just ask you to turn on the light if you don't mind? It's a little too dark. Let's just give me one moment. V'harei berchas haaretz adayin lo higia hasha ad achar hagalos be'eret lolahem. And the blessings that we know Yitzchak speaks about, when he talks about the land being blessed with an abundance of rain and the dew and so forth, that does not happen until after the 400 years that was promised to Abraham. That's what the Netziv writes. V'harei berchas ha'aretz, the blessing of the land that's going to be this magnificent land, adayin lo higia hasha ad achar hagolos ba'eretz. The blessings of the land were only going to be fulfilled after you fulfill the I wouldn't call it a blessing, but a promise, nonetheless, a prophecy that you're going to be sojourning in a land that is not your own. So Yaakov wasn't going into the lion's den because he wanted to live off of this magnificent land. So magnificent, yeah. The blessings have not yet arrived. Ella mipnei. So why is it that Yaakov changes his course, if you will, pun someone intended? Right? Why is it that Yaakov changes his course and he decides to tackle the issue head on? What motivated Yaakov to do so? Mipnei shahaya eretz migurei aviv. You want to know why? He says in Netziv, because this is the land where his fathers, I should say, father and grandfather, where they had dwelled. And the bolder words, v'niskadisha b'torah v'avoda miklar. And it has already been sanctified through Torah and the service of the Almighty. I'm just going to skip the Rosh Tevos over here. V'af agav debechol makom sheyashav Yaakov hayu le'eda kedusha b'kriyas hora haTorah. Even though wherever Yaakov would have pitched his tent, wherever Yaakov would have chosen to settle, he would have infused with kedusha. So even if Yaakov would have made a decision to go to Jordan or to Aleppo or to Mitzrayim, wherever Yaakov would have decided to go, he would have brought kedusha. He could have sanctified that place. Nonetheless, mikol makom, skipping to next line, eino dome lemakom mishurash kvar lekedusha. You can't compare a location where you are just beginning to infuse it with kedusha to a location that has already been settled by 2 generations prior of Shomei Torah Mitzvah. Yaakov is making a decision now. Where does he want to raise his family, essentially? He's left Haran. He's got a whole crew with him. He's got a whole brood with him. Where is he going to settle down and take root? And the whole world was open to him. And quite frankly, wherever he would have settled, he would have done a fine job. But when Yaakov is making a decision, where do I want to settle down? What was prompting him to settle in the land of Israel is it's Eretz Migurei Aviv. This is a land that has already been infused with Kedusha for 2 generations. So while I could make an imprint on the land wherever I choose to settle, but going to Israel is already linking up, sinking in with previously established Kedusha. And the Netziv says something startling in source number 5, paragraph number 2, and then Chazan, I'll get to your comment. Writes in Netziv, V'harei afilu le'inyan kivura. When it comes to burial, so the Gemara in Ksubos says, you're gonna find this very interesting. The kimo de yafa be'eretz Yisrael yosem mikol haratzos. Just like we say that it's best to be buried in Israel as opposed to any other location. Kach yafe Bavel shehu makom Torah yoser mikol haratzos. So too is Bavel better than any other location. Now, I don't think the Gemara is creating a parallel. I don't think the Gemara is saying that Israel is just as good. That Bavel is just as good as Israel. That's not the case. But the point is, all things being equal, where should a person choose to be buried? So Israel's on top of the list. If they can't make it to Israel in times of Chazal, in times of the Amoraim who are living in Bavel, best to be buried in Bavel because that is a makom kedusha. True makom Torah yosem mikol haratzos. It's a place of Torah more than any other land. So what's the Netziv showing you? The Netziv is showing you that we can impart kedusha into the land. There can be an infusion of kedusha into the land, and it's not unique just to Israel. Obviously, Israel has the capacity for the greatest level of kedusha. But anywhere where previous generations have led a life of Judaism, that also creates a makom kedusha. So if a person has to pick where they're going to be buried, better to be buried in a place where there was an establishment of Torah, where there were Jewish communities. So it says in Etziv, Mikol sheken yeshiva b'chayim v'adai tov liyos makom mushrash l'Torah v'avoda. If that's the halacha regarding burial, how much more so is it best to actually live in a land that is well established with Torah and avoda and the sanctity, the kedusha. And that's the beautiful insight of the Etziv. That's why the Torah tells us, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv. Be'eretz migurei aviv is not a geographical identification, because we know the Torah could have just said, Vayeshev Yaakov eretz Canaan. I would have known where Yaakov is. Be'eretz migurei aviv is the Torah's way of telling us what was motivating Yaakov to overcome his stance, which is a stance of running away, which is a stance of flight. What motivates him to overcome that default posture? It was his desire to connect with the Kedusha, with the lives of his father and grandfather, where they built their communities, where they raised their families. And that was such a great urge for Yaakov that he overcame his dispositions. He went into the lion's den, he met up with Esav, and ultimately he chose to settle in the land of Israel because the Eretz Migurei Aviv. By the way, those of us that study Nefesh Harab on Shabbos afternoon, so we came across a very similar point a little while ago. This is a famous vort from the Rav Shechter writes in Nefesh Harab, that in Az Yashir, so when the Jewish people were singing out the beautiful praises to Ribono Shel Olam, they say, Zekeli va'anvehu, Elokei avi va'aromimenu. Zekeli va'anvehu. This is my God, and I will beautify him. So there's a personal connection, but the Jewish people don't stop there. Elokei avi va'aromimenu. It's the God of my father, and I will also exalt him. And if you look at Rashi, I don't have the Rashi in front of me, but Rashi says something along the lines of, Lo ani techilas hakedusha. I understand that it doesn't start with me. I am not the initiator of this relationship. It has already been well founded, and it's ground that has been sort of trodden on already by our forefathers. And a Jew has to understand that a Jew can create kedusha, a Jew can have a connection with their Ribono Shel Olam wherever he or she is throughout the world. But a person can deepen their connection if they're able to sink in with the traditions of their family, with the traditions of the generations that have come prior. And that's what we're learning over here, Be'eretz Migurei Aviv. Okay, Chazan, you've been waiting.
You're saying that Yaakov was not in a permanent area.
Right.
Because the Torah tells us, but what he did choose was the best that there was.
Okay.
If this is not going to be a permanent thing.
Interesting. You're saying that in a little bit, the Netziv and the Ramban are contradicting one another.
A little bit.
Because the Ramban is saying that Yaakov very deliberately chose to live in this difficult land as a foreigner, knowing that at least the clock of the 400 years was counting down. But it was not a Chaim Benachas. It wasn't so easy. It wasn't so easy. He knew he was going to be a Ger. On the other hand, you're saying that Netziv is focusing on the beauty of the land of Israel, the fact that it's already founded with Makom, it's a founded Makom Kedusha because of Abraham. So you could say it's a machlokas. Also, you could say that the ideas are not inherently inconsistent. They're not mutually exclusive. Yaakov, particularly from the perspective of Yitzchak, he understands that just like his father lived as a foreigner, he never really had permanence in the land, but nonetheless was still able to set up a Makom Kedusha. So he hoped to do the same thing. He understood he wasn't going to be able to settle down fully. He understood he was going to be a foreigner, but he wanted to at least go down that path in the same place where his father went down that path. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
If his feeling was this was not a permanent resident,
right?
Why is he telling us that this was the most beautiful piece of real estate in the area?
Right, because what made it beautiful? It's not the fact that they had this magnificent mansion that they had paid off, so there's no mortgage and mamish. This was going to be the land that they dwelt in for forever. the beauty of it just came from the fact, I shouldn't say just, but the beauty of it stemmed from the fact the land where Yaakov's father and his Zayda lived. And that infused the land with Kedusha. So I don't think it's inconsistent at all now that we're talking it out. I think both perspectives are accurate ones. Yes?
Was there some inspiration, Yaakov, to return to where he was born and where he was brought up?
From what perspective? From an emotional perspective, where he wanted to be a part, he wanted to go back to his hometown?
Well, where his family, where he was brought up, where his family had been.
What makes that meaningful? Going back to a person's hometown. Why is that meaningful? Because he was reliving his childhood memories. He was able to bring up his kids with the same amenities that he was brought up with. Right, so I think that's what the Rabban is speaking to. But I think the Rabban is speaking on a spiritual level, not on a emotional or physical level. I think Yaakov was driven by connecting with the Kedusha that was already there. Yeah. And I think that's true even today. When one visits the land of Israel, you feel like you're walking in a land where so many generations have come before you. There has been so much self-sacrifice in generations before us to allow us to travel in Israel today. And you feel that. You really feel like you're sinking in to something far greater. Everyone has to join me in May when we travel to Israel. Bezrat Hashem. Okay, let's look at the Malbim now in source number 6. The Malbim, another one of the magnificent century biblical commentaries, writes as follows: Vayeshev Yaakov, Va'asher kotev sipur haparsha hazos, v'chol inyan mechiras Yosef, haisa nisiva me'es Hashem letachlis kolel kidei sheyardu avosim Mitzrayma. So writes the Malbim as follows: that this whole story is written down for us to understand how Yosef ultimately ended up in Egypt, and how Yosef's family, meaning Yaakov and the other boys, how they also ended up in Egypt. What was the point of the experience in Egypt to begin with? Litzarek Sham. The way the work with metal would purify the metal. They put it over fire and all of the impurities would sort of melt away. And that's the way Chazal think about our Mitzrayim. It was this purification that we had to go through in order to remove all of our impurities. Okay, it's not the focus of the shir, but saying is we know from God that we had to end up in Mitzrayim. And the purpose of the stories of Vayeshev and the parshios that follow, Mike, so on and so forth, they're all there to just give us context up in Mitzrayim. So the Malbim says, if you understand that that's the general perspective, that's the general purpose of these stories, therefore, Yaktim Lomar, Shelo Haya Efshar Sheyered Yaakov Mitzrayima, Ve'open Acher Al Yedei Ra'av V'chadona. So the Torah is telling us events that we're going to read about in terms of the brothers selling Yosef, that was the only way to get Yaakov to leave Mitzrayim and to get Yaakov to leave Israel and Yaakov's family to leave Israel. Had there been a famine, Yaakov was such a devotee of the land of Israel, he would have left. Another way to get Yaakov to come down. Ki Yaakov hisyashev b'kriyos. Yaakov settled down now. Keva. What does the word keva mean? The Mishnah in Avos tells us, Asay Torascha keva. What's keva? Keva means primary, it means set, it means organized. All of those words imply that Yaakov was here to stay. Yaakov finally arrived back after 20 plus years of traveling. No way, no how was he leaving again. Vayeshev Yaakov. Yaakov sat, he dwelled, he wasn't going anywhere. Why wasn't he going anywhere? So right to the Malbim, the Torah is telling us that's what Pasuk Aleph is all about. Number one, Mitzad Shehi Eretz Nigurei Aviv. First of all, Yaakov said, as we just learned in the Nesiv, Yaakov understood that this is the land of his forefathers. V'haya etzlo ki'artzo u'moladeto u'beis aviv. This was his land. This was where he was born. This was where he was raised. Interesting, Judy. In light of what you just said, I wonder if the Malbim is really getting to that exact point, that this was where this was very familiar to Yaakov. This was very, very familiar to Yaakov. And it really, in a way, the Malbim is focusing on the emotional perspective. It's not the spiritual perspective, because the Malbim says that's the second level. In Bays, writes the Malbim, so number one, it was the Eretz Migurei Aviv. It was the land where his father had brought him up. Number two, Mitzachi Eretz Canaan. Hamuchanes likedusha ulashkachas Hashem. This is the land of Israel that is prepared, is ready for kedusha. This can connect with the Ribono Shel Olam. So the Malbim is telling us as follows: that the first pasuk in this grand narrative about Joseph and his brothers, the first pasuk is telling us why what we're about to read is altogether necessary. Why didn't Hashem just make a famine and bring everyone down to Mitzrayim and have everybody chained up there, slaves, and everything would have played out the same? Why didn't that happen? We saw famines that took place in the times of Abraham. We saw famines that took place in the times of Isaac. So why can't there just be a famine? That would have obviated the whole story. We could have just thrown the whole story out. What's the answer? The Torah is telling you, well, Vayeshev Yaakov, the Eretz Migurei Aviv. Yaakov was happy to be home. Yaakov didn't want to go anywhere anymore. He finally, Judy, I'm gonna echo what you said. He finally got back to the house where he was raised. He finally was feeling like he had settled after so many years of being on the run, being in a stranger's home. He finally returned back to his roots. That felt very good for him. He wasn't going anywhere. So he was back, the Eretz Migurei Aviv. Additionally, you want to know why else? A famine would not have brought Yaakov down to Mitzrayim. Where else was he? The Eretz Canaan. He was in the land of Canaan. He understood that he had come home to the land that is primed for a connection with the Almighty. That is the best real estate if you're looking to forge a relationship with God. So from both of those perspectives, the fact that it was Vayeshev Yaakov, the Eretz Migurei Aviv, and additionally the Eretz Canaan, from both of those perspectives, no way, no how was Yaakov going to leave because of a famine. And that's why the Ribono Shel Olam had to create a situation where Yaakov would be forced down to Mitzrayim totally against his will, and in circumstances that certainly Yaakov would have never imagined at the beginning of Parshat Vayeshev. Yeah, we're processing, we're getting it? Okay, it's a beautiful insight from the Malbim. So let's just recap for a moment before we move on to the next segment of the shir. So we started just looking at the very first verse of this week's Torah portion, Parshat Vayeshev. We asked the question, why doesn't the Torah just tell us, Vayeshev Yaakov, Eretz Canaan, that Yaakov dwelled in the land of Canaan? What is added by the verse of the Eretz Migurei Aviv? What is added by the fact that the Torah tells us that he has settled in the land of his father's sojournings? What do we learn from that? So we saw three approaches. We saw the Ramban, the Netziv, and the Malbim. The Ramban said that the Migurei Aviv is a contrast to Esav. Esav settles in Har Seir, and he's there, he's set, nothing more is needed. He has taken hold of his ancestral land, done, game over. He's fully settled. The contrast to Yaakov. Yaakov continued on in his father's legacy of being a foreigner. Yaakov never really settled down and paid off his mortgage and said, I'm done. Because Yaakov, as Yitzchak understood, that they're in the process of paying down debt. What's the debt? Years of exile. So Yaakov did not fully settle. He didn't feel that he had come upon the ancestral land that was his forever. He felt like a Jew in the exile. Because he understood, as Yitzchak understood, that they are in the middle of the 400 years of being foreigners. That was the Ramban's. The Eretz Migurei Aviv is not an identification, is not identifying a geographical location, but rather a mindset, really. It was Yaakov understood that, like his father, he had to act like a foreigner because this is part of the Zera from Bris bin Abisar, and this is part of the decree that was told to Abraham. We saw the Netziv, who takes the approach that the Eretz Migurei Aviv is telling us what gave Yaakov the courage to overcome his disposition of flight. Away. Over here, Yaakov went into the lion's den. Over here, Yaakov encountered on because he wanted to dwell be'eretz migurei aviv. He understood that yes, he could access kedusha, he can set up a makom kadosh wherever he would be, but it would be that much richer and deeper and more profound if it was in a land where his father and his grandfather had also raised their families. Attaching oneself to the kedusha of previous generations is such a profound connection. And lastly, the Malbim's interpretation. The Malbim says that the Torah is telling us why this whole narrative of Joseph and his brothers is altogether necessary. Because no way, no how is Yaakov going to leave because of a famine. That would not to bring him down to Mitzrayim. Number one, because he had finally come home, be'eretz migurei aviv. And number two, because he had finally reached the land of Kedusha once again, and nothing was going to sway him to leave, except the circumstances that God created through the animosity between Joseph. So three very different approaches, all sinking in to that one extra phrase, be'eretz migurei aviv. Any questions so far? On the World Wide Web, I hope we are still paying attention and enjoying. And if you have ESPN up on another screen, I can see. That's a joke. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's. Okay, so let's move on now. We're not going to have time to look at Rashi and the Kliyakar. We have actually covered that in years past. It's such a beautiful insight. I thought I would share with you again, but the hour is late. So let's move on now to the fourth verse in this week's Torah portion. So we're looking now at chapter 37. Number 4, Perek Lamed Zayin Pasuk Dalet. So we know that things sour pretty quickly between Yosef and his brothers. And the Torah tells us as follows. This is source number 9. Ve'yiru Echav ki oso ahav avihem mikol Echav. And his brothers saw that their father loved him, meaning Joseph, more than all his brothers. Vayisneu oso. What's sinah? Hatred, right? Sinah, sin. They hated him. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom, and they could not speak with him peacefully. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom, they could not speak with him peacefully. So Rashi tells us that even though this is a very negative story, obviously when you have members of a family that can't speak with each other, that there's a feeling of resentment and hatred, that's very, very serious. But Rashi says embedded into this very serious and negative storyline is actually something positive. Writes Rashi in source number 10, V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom, mitoch ginusam lamanu shivcham. Through the disparaging remarks about the brothers, how they were filled with hatred, we learn shavach. What does the word shavach mean? Praise. We learn praise. So what's the praise that we learn? Writes Rashi, shelo dabru achas b'peh v'achas b'leiv. They weren't two-facing. They weren't acting one way in the present and another way privately. There are some people who are very superficial and very fake, and they might be able to interact with somebody in a public setting, but when they come back home to the privacy of their own home, they act in a completely different way. I think you find that to be very, very displeasing. It's not something that you like. You want to feel like you know somebody. So the way they interact with you publicly is the way they are privately. And if you would storm into someone's home at 10 o'clock in the evening, you wouldn't be surprised to see what they're doing. You would be consistent with their personality. And that gives people confidence in somebody, when you know that what you see is what you get. And it was telling us that the brothers were like that. They weren't inconsistent. They weren't trying to two-face. They weren't acting like, oh, Yosef's our buddy in public, and then in private speaking lashon hara about. Oh yachlo dabro l'shalom. They could not speak peacefully to him. So they said nothing. I get the sense that they just ignored him, rather than trying to act nicely. They just consistent. That's what Rashi says. Mitoch ginusam, amidst that, again, this negative, disparaging narrative, we learned something that's good. At least they were consistent. At least what the language of Rashi says, at least their mouth and their heart were same, and they weren't coming up with this fake and superficial persona and then dropping it once Yosef left. Okay, so Haksava Kabbalah, which is another 19th century biblical commentary that we don't oftentimes focus on. The last name is Mickelberg. I always get it a little bit confused. I can bring it up just one moment to make sure that I give you the exact name. One moment. Right, Rav Yaakov Tzvi Micklenberg. I always get that last name a little confused. So Micklenberg wrote a beautiful commentary on the Torah, focused more on the linguistics of the Torah, the actual words of the Torah, and through the linguistic analysis, he oftentimes creates beautiful insights in terms of the broader narrative of whatever it is that the Torah is discussing. So this is no different. Look at what Haksava Kabbalah writes in source number 11. Below Yachlu, they were not able. So writes the Haksava Kabbalah. I'll tell you outside it for a moment, and we'll look at it inside. He writes as follows: when you say you're not able to do something, so that has two connotations, doesn't it? What are the two connotations? Oh, I'm not able to join you for dinner this evening. What does that mean? So what could it mean? Give me the simple explanation. What does it mean? I'm not able to join for dinner this evening, meaning I physically can't come. I have other plans. I have to go to a class. I have to, whatever it is, I physically can't make it. What would be another interpretation? I can't make it this evening. I really don't want to. I could. I've got nothing. Collection. I've got really nothing else that exciting going on. I just don't want to. So there are two ways of understanding the language. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. They were not able to speak in peace. Does that mean that they were physically unable? Were they so filled with hatred that they physically could not utter a nice word to Yosef? Maybe it means that they could have spoken to Yosef. They could have uttered the words, but they didn't want to, because they had a sense of manners and refinement. And they did not want to speak to Yosef because they were so disgusted with him. So there are two ways of understanding. Could they physically not? Were they so overcome with hatred and anger that they just couldn't open their mouth? Or was it they could have, but they decided not to? They decided not to. So which one is worse? The former is worse, right? If they were so angry that they physically were handicapped, they couldn't speak, that's much worse. Let's look at what Haksava Kabbalah writes in source number 11. Yesh nimna min hadavar misibas chesron hayicholes v'hakalach. Sometimes someone is not able to do something because of the lack of strength and power. Kimo v'lo yachol Yosef his apek. We know, we're going to read about a couple of parshas from now. Torah says that Yosef was not able to hold back. Remember, that's when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers. He could not hold back his tears. So that was little physically. He could not hold himself back. Additionally, v'lo yachlo echav la'anososo. In that very same context, the Torah tells us that the brothers could not answer him. I am Yosef. What? You're Yosef. They physically couldn't find the words to respond to this person who they just figured out was their long-lost brother Yosef. Both of those instances are physical limitations. So that's one type of limitation. The yesh nimna misibos hamusar v'hamitzvah. But there are other times when a person is held back because of a refinement, right? Because it's not appropriate. And they hold themselves back. They physically could do so, but they choose not to do so. And the Haksava Kabbalah gives us two different examples of that. Lo yuchlun hamitzriim la'achol es ha'ivrim. So we know that when Yosef and his brothers come down, so they eat when Yosef and his brothers dine together, after the brothers come down the second time, So we know that they eat separately. And the Torah tells us, "V'lo yuchlun hamitzriim lachol tevriim." What does that mean over there? Does it mean that physically the Egyptians could not raise a fork and eat when a Jew is in the room? That's not what it means. It means it wasn't their culture. It wasn't their way to eat in the presence of a Jew. That's a very different type than we learned about regarding Yosef revealing himself and the brothers not being able to answer. Additionally, the Torah tells in Parshat Vayeshev that there were a segment of Jews that were not able to bring the Korban Pesach, not because they physically bring Korban Pesach, but the Torah says it's not the right thing to bring Korban Pesach when you're tamei. So that's why Haksav Kabbalah writes, "Misibas hamoser v'hamitzvah." Sometimes it's a manner, it's an etiquette that a person refrains from doing something, and sometimes it's because of mitzvah. There are all sorts of times that we're able to engage in prohibited behavior, but we don't. It's not because we physically cannot, it's because we are loyal to God and to God's mitzvahs, and we will not allow ourselves to do whatever it is that we might want to do. So those are two very different models. So when the Torah says lo yachol, it can mean all sorts of different things. The word yachol is used in all four of those contexts. It's used by the brothers not being able to respond. It's used by the Mitzri not eating with the Jews, and by the people not being able to offer the Korban Pesach. The same word, yachol, is used, but it means very different things. Good. Next paragraph. V'kan yesh lefarish be'echad mishnei panim ha'elu. In our context regarding the brothers of Yosef, one could interpret it in any of these two ways. Im misibas minias hayicholes shemigodel sinasam oso hayalahem bilti efshar ledaber imo dibure shalom. It could be that they were so filled with hatred they simply could not speak to him. It was a physical impediment. They couldn't. Im misibas hamoser mitzvah shelo hayu rotzen liyos min hakas hadovrim b'fiyam shalom im re'ehem v'rabbi libam. Or maybe it was from an ethical perspective. They didn't want to be part of the individuals who speak one way and believe something else. It says Haksav Kabbalah. That's why Rashi tells you that it's the second time. It wasn't as bad as the first time. If it would have been below Yachlo, physically they couldn't speak. Wow, can you imagine what type of hatred a person has to have in their heart that they physically can't speak? There are people like that. There are people that are traumatized by another individual that they can't speak in their presence. God forbid a sexual predator walks in, the victim is so traumatized, they freeze. They physically can't move. So there's hatred that brings someone to that level also. And Haksav Kabbalah is telling us that didn't happen here. It wasn't that bad. Below Yachlo, it means that they didn't allow themselves. They could have spoken, but they didn't allow themselves to speak because that would have been inconsistent with the way they feel. But the hatred wasn't that bad. Says Haksav Kabbalah, that's also hinted to by the Targum, by the Aramaic translations of the Torah. We're in source number 11, paragraph number 3. V'la kavana zu shinu hamitargamim unklis ve Yonasan ben Uziel letargem v'lo savon. That's why if you look at the Aramaic translations of the Torah, the language that's used is v'lo savon. They did not desire. That's the Aramaic translation. They did not desire. L'haktin sinasam, because by translating that way, what does katan mean? Small. The Aramaic commentaries are diminishing the hatred. Below tzavon, meaning did not desire to speak with Yaakov, to speak with Yosef that way. They were exactly, and that's what these translators are doing is they are lahaktin, diminishing the hatred. It wasn't so bad. It wasn't that they were paralyzed. They just didn't have. They didn't want to. Shalom nimnu midivrei shalom misibas godel hasina. It's not that they were so incredibly filled with hatred. Rak misibas ratzon nafsham leval ya'avru al chok hamoser levli hiskari v'ala b'fiyan v'libam yarchaku mimenu. it again was from an ethical perspective, not from a physical perspective. They didn't want to be the type of people who were two-facing. The Haksav Kabbalah goes deeper. And again, this is a very interesting, somewhat technical analysis, but it's really quite beautiful. So the Haksav Kabbalah wants to know, how do we know that the word Yachol is related to the word Ratzon, Savon? How do, again, the Metargumim, they come along and they say, V'lo Yachlo means V'lo Savon, they do not desire. So how do we know that there's a connection between the word Yachol and the word Savon to desire? Yachol means not able. How do we jump to the word desire? So writes Haksav as follows in the fourth paragraph. Milas Yachlu inyan chepetz v'ratzon. The hint that Yachol is connected with chepetz, which is connected with desire, from two psukim. First of all, number one, mean Vatichel David HaMelech. There's a pasuk in Shmuel Beis at the end of the story with Amnon and Tamar, which talks about David desiring. So the language the Torah uses is, the Navi uses is Vatichel David HaMelech. And David desires. The word Yachol sometimes is used in the context of desire. V'chemoshe Tirgem HaYerushalmi, we also have a similar translation by the Jerusalem Talmud, where it says, Vayichal Elokim Vayom HaShvi'i. That's a pasuk, right? That's a pasuk in Bereshis. Vayichal Elokim Vayom HaShvi'i. What does the word Vayichal mean over here? V'chamed. God desired. Asher mimenu amru hamisajim halokiim chemdas yamim osa karasa. We say that in our davening. Chemdas hayamim. It's the most desired of days. Where do we get that from? That it's chemdas hayamim? It's because the Yerushalmi translates the word Vayichal Elokim as chemda. God desired the seventh day. So the point is that the word Yachlu that we have in our pasuk found in the connection with desire. And that's why when they the brothers did not desire, it's telling us again that the hatred wasn't so bad. They could have, but they did not desire to speak in a way that was inconsistent with the feelings of their heart. Okay.
But you have to move off the dime at some point.
What do you mean?
In other words, they didn't want to speak out of both sides of the room.
Right.
But that's a temporary thing.
Right.
Because eventually something is going to have to break and move forward.
Right. That's true. And that's ultimately what happened. We know that the brothers ultimately came up with a plan, and originally wanted to kill him, and then they decided to sell him. Very fair point. Let me just end with one other very interesting insight from Haksav Kabbalah, from Goldberg, if I said that correctly. So he points out that the Torah itself hints that this was the way of the brothers. That the way of the brothers was one of refinement. And they were not these morally unsavory characters. What's the general rule were speaking one thing and doing another. How do we know that this was their general approach? So Haksav Kabbalah points out, if you look back at source number 9, the Torah could have said, V'lo yachol daber imo b'shalom. The Torah could have said they could not speak with him in peace. That would have been reasonable, right? V'lo yachlu daber imo. They could not speak with him in peace. But it doesn't say that. The Torah says, V'lo yachlo dabro l'shalom. They could not speak in peace. It wasn't unique to Yosef. The word imo is not really, the word imo is not said separately. It means daber imo. But by putting it together, says Haksav Kabbalah, it's actually painting a much broader picture. They could not, in general, speak when they didn't feel that it was consistent with what they thought. So, had the Torah said, "V'lo yachlo dabru imo," we would have known it was just regarding Yosef that they had this higher ethic. But by the Torah combining the pronoun with the verb, "V'lo yachlo dabro shalom," the shalom, it's telling us that as a general rule, this was their mantra. We can only do things that we truly believe in. say one thing and act a different way. So the Torah itself hints to the fact that the brothers were of a certain refinement. And they did hold themselves to an ethical standard where they were not allowing themselves to be conniving and two-faced. So yes, Jack.
Shouldn't we say this? It doesn't the story should have.
I'm not 100% convinced that that's the case, but at very least I can deflect what you're saying by whittling it down to being two brothers. Here we're speaking about the 10 brothers. In that story, it was just Shimon and Levi, so the Torah is speaking more generally. But there's much more to be said. Whether or not what they did in Shechem was a reflection of really an unrefined character, I don't think we have a clear consensus from the commentaries of the Torah if that's the case or not. So I share with you Haksava Kabbalah because I thought it was a very, very interesting insight. We read this Rashi, oh yeah, it's nice they weren't able they were learning some praise amongst this very negative storyline, and the truth is it's much deeper than that. And Rashi is teaching you that there were two options on the table, and it's the lesser evil that Rashi is hinting to, and the fact he's able to back up the Targum by showing you places where the word Yachol is associated with desire, just enriches our appreciation for Rashi, the Targum, and the overall storyline. So I hope you are continuing to enjoy the essentially commentaries the way I am. It's a pleasure to again welcome everyone who joined us on the World Wide Web, and Bezrat Hashem will continue next week with Parshat Miketz. Okay, Yeshikoach. All right, good. I mean,